You're listening to the Self-Made is a Myth, Make a Difference Together show with your host, Coach Tim Campsall, where we talk with successful business owners to hear the stories of their journeys in building their successful businesses. And more importantly, we recognize the folks who help them excel because we know that achieving business success is not something we can do on our own.
Hello, everyone. This is Coach Tim Campsall, and I'm excited to have a fellow business owner from Indiana with us today. Something unique about my guest is that he is number 8 of 10 children in his family. Wow, that's a big family. We're going to ask him about how that was growing up. In his downtime, he enjoys spending time with his family, and he's most proud of surviving his mistakes in his business. It's my pleasure to welcome Brian to the show today. Hi, Brian.
Hey, Tim, how are you?
I'm awesome. Thanks for asking. Hey, let's start with having you introduce yourself. Give us your full name and tell us a little bit of your personal story, like where you were born and live and about your family and hobbies.
Sure. So my name is Brian Stewart Adams. I was born and raised in Indiana. I grew up in northern Indiana, small town Plymouth, which was a great experience. Went to school in Indiana, went to Franklin College, graduated from Franklin College, moved to Indianapolis, and I've been here ever since. And that was 1983. So I tell everybody I'm a Hoosier by choice, which has been great. I mean, I've loved living here in Indiana. Other places are great to visit, but this has always been my home. So we were, again, I was one of 10 kids. So we had a lot of fun in our family, a lot of entertainment, a lot of things went on. Not only was that going on, but we had a pretty big neighborhood. We had another family in the neighborhood with 9 kids. We had another family in the neighborhood with 7. There was a lot of athletics going on then, a lot of football teams, baseball teams, basketball games. So growing up was a lot of fun. So after Franklin College, I took a job with a local CPA firm, spent 11 years in public accounting, which was awesome. I mean, I gained a lot of experience doing that. And then in 1994, came on board here at Godby Hearth Home as the president. There's not a lot of people that offer an accountant the job of president. Usually the title is CFO. Yeah. And then in 1998, I bought the owner, Dennis Godby, out, and have been an owner of Godby since then.
Fantastic. And what do you like to do in your spare time? What are your hobbies, and or tell us a little bit about your family?
Yeah, so my wife, Ann, we went to high school together, so we've known each other since like 7th grade. It was ironic, we didn't date in high school, but we'd always been very good friends. So when I moved to Indianapolis, she came to Indianapolis, and we have 3 kids, all of which are grown. One lives in Cincinnati, one in Baltimore, and one here in Indianapolis. So we're very happy, and they're off the payroll, so that's kind of nice. Doing well on their own. And as far as, so we just spend a lot of time with family. Obviously, Ann's family she's one of 4. So the majority of our free time is spent with family, and it's either my family, her family, or our family together.
Wonderful.
The one thing that I probably do more than anything is grill. I love to grill, and a lot of my weekends on a Sunday afternoon, usually I've got something on the grill. That's part of the menu for the day. So
fantastic. Awesome. Brian, is there a funny story that your family likes to share or tell about you that you'd be willing to share with us today?
So, I mean, there are obviously a number of stories, and they get retold and retold and retold over time. But probably the one as it related to me is they always told me, being number 8, they always told me that my dad didn't know that I was his child for the first 2 years, because I was always over at the neighbor's house and they took care of me. I was a baby when we moved into that house. The neighbors were loving people, and they loved having a child in the house. So I was told that he didn't know I was his own child, and he didn't know my name till I was in 1st grade.
That's awesome. Yeah, siblings can be cruel, right?
Right.
Brian, tell us, how the business, I know you mentioned already that you you purchased it. But how did that all come about? And at what point did you have the confidence that you could run your own business?
So my dad owned a Culligan Softwater Franchise in Plymouth, Indiana. So I grew up with a father that was a small business owner, and always looked up to my dad. So when I was in college, I worked with my dad, and two of my brothers ended up buying into that business, and they worked there for 40 years and retired from there as well, just like my dad. So going into college, I always wanted to own a small company. I felt like that was what I wanted to do, which is what led me to get an accounting degree, thinking accountants are the smartest people in the world. And so I wanted to be part of that team. So I got an accounting degree. Coming out of college, I went with a regional firm because I knew that that company dealt with small businesses. I had no desire to go into a firm that would put me on the Lilly audit or put me, on some large bank. So I went with a small firm, dealt with a lot of small business owners over the years, and always with that vision of someday getting into a small company and being part of the management of that. So Dennis Godby, who was actually a customer of mine when I was in accounting, we became good friends, and he was getting to an age he was ready to move on from the business and really didn't have a precise succession plan. So he came to me and said, "Look, if you come on board, what would it take?" And I really didn't take much more salary or anything special other than I said, "I just want to have the opportunity to buy the business." And that was a handshake. And he said, I'm good with that. So he had two daughters, had no interest in the business. So he was ready to move on. And so that's what happened in 94. That's what moved me here. As I said earlier, no one offers a CPA the job of president for a company. I could have taken a CFO job, every year for 10 years, but that's not what I ultimately wanted to do. So Dennis was the guy, he gave me a shot. He just gave me a shot to do this.
That's so cool. Thank you for sharing. Hey, tell us a little bit more about the company. Say the name again. What do you guys do? How do you help people?
So the company is Godby Hearth Home. There's 3 Godbys in town that are small businesses. We are the fireplace guys. There's Godby Heating, Plumbing, and Electrical. And then there's Godby Home Furnishings, which we get confused with a lot. But we're Hearth and Home. So we have 2 locations. We have our main office on Rockville Road, which is a retail location, as well as our office and warehouse. And then we have a interactive studio in the Indiana Design Center in Carmel, which is it's itself a pretty unique story. So that's how we're set up. We basically have specialty products that we deal in the residential construction industry. So we will sell straight to homeowners when they're doing remodel projects, new construction, anything like it, service, that type of stuff, or just adding on an accessory to the house. So we do fireplaces, which would include gas logs, glass doors, that type of thing. We have a division that does shower doors and custom glass and mirror. So we also have that division. And then we have a division that's kind of outdoor living. That's really more of building custom grill islands, fire pits, and outdoor fire features. So that's how the company's broken up, is into those 3 product categories. Both locations are staffed with salespeople to help anyone that walks in the door have a question. And the thing that makes us a little unique in the industry of construction is that we actually are a supplier and an installing company, and we use our own employees. We do not subcontract work. So when somebody comes in here, from the first person they deal with to the last person they deal with, they're dealing with employees of Godby Hearth Home.
Fantastic. So you have a little bit more end-to-end control over the customer experience.
Exactly. Exactly. And as you know, it makes us unique in the construction industry.
Yeah, absolutely. So Brian, shifting gears a little bit here, and you already talked about Dennis, so he may be this person, but share a story where someone pushed you or inspired you that you could do it, even though maybe you didn't know that you could, and the impact that that person had on you.
Yeah. So, I mean, I think there were several people. I mean, you just don't do this alone. As you said in our topic, So probably the first person that really impacted me was my dad. He showed me a lot of how to do things. And so I was fortunate to have someone that not only was an inspiration, but somebody who was an example of how to do it, to live your life professionally and personally. And he was that person. I had the fortunate that I also had the opportunity to work with him for several years on a daily basis. I mean, I was in a truck with him. I was talking to him about jobs, about work, about life. So there's no doubt that his impact on me was huge. Dennis came along, and he and I just clicked from the first time we met. He's very enthusiastic guy, very creative person, out of the box thinker. He had his own story about how he got into business, and he had been in business with his brother Tom for years. When I met him, they had broken up the company, they'd split off from each other. So he had this element of creativity and trying to do things that were unique. Building the store on the west side was a huge deal. When he built this store in 90, there was virtually no retail on the west side of Indianapolis. All of Avon wasn't even there yet.
Right.
But he felt like, being a West Sider, that he felt like this should be a destination place. So those were the things that he did. And so when he came to me, it was another one of those out of the box things. I think he believed that I had the same value system as him. He felt like, I had this desire to make this business grow and do something special. And I think that's really what attracted him to offer me the company.
Yeah, that's awesome.
So.
Wow, what a cool couple of experiences. So I'm sure you've seen a lot in your years. What's your biggest learning as a business owner?
Well, I told you, in the beginning, is about the biggest thing I've learned is surviving my mistakes. But the things that I've really learned, one is I believe in. I learned that you have to execute from A to Z. That was a big deal for me. I mean, I think a lot of people know where they are and know where they want to be, but they try to skip steps along the way.
Yes.
And skipping steps is a huge mistake.
Uh-huh.
You end up going back and going back and going back. So I really felt like that was a real big one for me, was that learning that you have to do everything from A to Z.
Yeah.
And also, the other thing that helped me is realizing you have to stay focused. You can't, I always tell everybody in the company, including my managers, we all have to be focused on one or two things.
Yeah.
And those are the things everybody has to focus on. You can't have some people focusing on something else.
Yeah.
And probably the last thing that I really learned a little bit the hard way is that, cash flow is the most important thing in any sport. It's all about cash flow.
So the idea of the A to Z thought and really focusing on the individual steps that you need to do, that can sometimes be a discouraging or frustrating or feel like oh my goodness, all right, I just want to move on. But to your point, if we don't have that diligence and that flawless execution of those individual steps, then we're not going to end up realizing the benefit of the plan and getting to the point that we need to be. And so often we can get distracted by other things that are going on and pull our focus off of that flawless execution.
Yeah, that was really hard for me to learn. And I think for most people, it is probably the biggest challenge.
Yeah.
But once you do that, and once you stay committed to that process, and one of the A to Z may be getting in through the middle of the alphabet and realizing this really is not something you need to do, or you dismantle it, or you change it into a different program.
Yeah.
But staying with it is the number one key. Staying with it.
It reminds me, there's this illustration, a cartoon illustration of a guy digging a tunnel underground and gives up and walks away, and he's like two swipes away from this big pile of diamonds, right? and how many times, right, have we thought about giving up on something and then decided, you know what, I'll give it another couple weeks, and then it actually works.
Yeah, I think that probably the biggest thing I've learned on that is as you're going through the process, is everybody thinks they always know the outcome. And I've realized that most people And then all their steps and all their decisions and all their processes are focused to get to the outcome. And so I talk to people all the time about that the process is more important than really the answer, and that you can't come up with an answer and then work towards it.
Right.
So we really try to stay focused on the first thing we do is focus on the purpose. Why are we doing this? What is so important that we need to allocate resources to this particular thing?
Yeah.
That once you do that, then you establish the process, the A to Z, and say, these are the steps we're going to take towards this, not knowing the outcome. But too often I see people get to an outcome and then they work to that outcome. So I always talk to people, I say, you got to believe in the process, trust the process. The process will get you to the answer you need, not the answer you want.
Right.
And I think what happens a lot of times with us is we get into that and we discover things that we didn't even anticipate.
Sure.
While going through the process, and actually maybe even changing the project a little bit, the direction.
Yeah.
Not completely, but moving it in another way that gives us a better outcome.
Yeah, absolutely. Hey, Brian, we know that business success doesn't happen in isolation. You alluded to that already, and you've talked about mistakes and challenges. So tell us what one of your biggest challenges during the years, and maybe a fellow colleague or business owner who came alongside you and helped you through that.
Yeah, so for me, the biggest issue I've always dealt with is human resources, the element of people. I mean, they're your greatest asset, but also it's probably something most people spend the least amount of time on.
Right.
My dad told me, when I called my dad and told him that I bought this business, and I said, I always wanted to own a business like you. And typical dad, he comes back with, he goes, well, you better watch out what you wish for, son. You may end up getting it. That was his response. So I think, that stuck with me all these years, thinking, well, maybe I don't want this. But the human resource element has always been my problem. And I think it's part of it from my family background. Because when you have 10 kids, just because you can't treat everybody equal and treat them fair.
Right.
So it's being fair is not always being equal. And that was something I grew up with. And I think when we have 28 employees, and I was trying to always be fair with employees, being a small business, trying to be flexible. And I think over the years, I realized that employees don't want that as much as they want it to be equal. So I've always struggled with tending to be more lenient, whether it's absenteeism or something going on in personal life, feeling like I needed to be more lenient. What I didn't realize initially was that was impacting everybody else in a negative way. So my partner here, Sean Wooden, who became a partner, Sean's an interesting story. He actually came on board here in February of '95, sweeping floors in the warehouse. And has worked his way up to 3 years ago. I sold him half the business.
Wow.
Sean has always been that guy for me of keeping me balanced and keeping me challenged on a day-to-day basis, especially in the area of human resources. And so I would say I, to this day, still struggle with the human resource side, although we're getting better with our, handbooks and manuals and process procedures on performance evaluations. But I tell any small business owner, nobody goes into small business to be an HR guy. That's what I
Right. Yes. Yeah. And to your point earlier, right, they're our greatest asset, and most people don't spend as much time, coaching, training, developing them as we should. And then, then we all are surprised why they don't work out as well as we wanted them to, right?
Exactly. And then it's, why are these people not performing? And we have a lot of discussions in our current management team about, what element of responsibility is it ours that this person is, because this person's not doing what we expect. So it's hard.
Yeah. We have a phrase that we use. It's life is a mirror. And in this context, what that means is if our staff are not performing the way that we want them to, it's a mirror, right? It's a mirror back to something that we're intentionally or unintentionally doing that's leading them to not performing the way that we want them to, right? And so it's then the reflection should be, okay, what do I need to do different, right? Or more of, or less of, or what do I need to change in order to have my team meeting expectations? And sometimes that change is just accountability. Sometimes that change is, unfortunately, right, letting somebody go. But you know, if they're not doing what we need, then it's on us to make sure that as managers that we're managing them to results.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. It's a great perspective too. I had not heard that one before, but it clearly is something that, you know, managing. But the other thing, you know, we always talk about it. How did most people become managers? Because they were great doers,
Yes,
right?
exactly. Yep.
So now they lean into this doing because that's got them where they were.
Yep.
And we had that conversation. In fact, we just finished a process of going through a responsibility chart and identifying the responsibilities of managers. And we got to the conclusion of it. And the answer was, okay, guys, anything that's not in your box, you have to give to somebody else.
Nice. Yeah.
And, you know, and they had stuff, you know, they were doing that was not in the box.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, but no, I'm all about human resources. I believe that the most of the successful company I've seen, that's probably the one thing they have done really well.
Yeah. You're right about, you know, we promote doers, and then in most cases, right, a lot of companies, they don't have a management training program. So the doer doesn't have the ability to learn how to become a manager. So they have to rely on what got them there, which is doing.
Right.
And that it's a
Exactly.
mental shift, but it's also a skill set shift of, you know, teaching our team, training them on how to become awesome managers.
I think what's interesting for me is was Sean Wooden, my partner, is for 20 some years, I was coaching him to become an owner or a manager or moving up in the company. And 3 years ago, when he became the owner, so he started coaching me
I love it. That's
on
awesome.
how to be a better manager. So it's
Yeah.
really great.
Brian, if I asked you to pick 3 people in your business owner journey that you're most grateful for them being there to help with your growth, who are those 3 people and how they help you?
So I would say number one is my wife. I mean, people don't realize that, you know, owning a company has its responsibilities and challenges that take time away from other things.
Yeah.
My wife has been really supportive. She reads me really well. She knows when I'm overwhelmed or stressed or dealing with some things. She's always there to kind of give me some comfort and kind of let me know that she believes in it, you know, what I'm doing, and she knows I can do it. And then there's other times when if I'm sitting around feeling sorry for myself or complaining about something that's not really a big deal, she kicks me in the pants and, you know, tells me to move on. So I think having someone that can really read you and
Yeah.
balance that, and the irony of it, she's really not involved in the business at all. She has never really had any role within the business, but just her
Okay.
ability to read me and be kind of away from the business has been great.
Yeah.
Having that person, I think if she was in the business as involved as, you know, sometimes spouses can be, that it's hard to step back and be objective. Well, she's provided that for me. That's probably number one. Obviously, Dennis Godby, you know, I tell people, the only person that was dumber than Dennis, you know, offering a CPA a company to buy was a CPA that bought a company. So yeah, we were just, I don't think that he and I joke about it, is we don't think that was the smartest thing either of us ever did, but it was something that we decided to do together.
Yeah.
And then the third would be, you know, obviously my dad. He was an incredible guy. I tell people, you know, he had a high school degree and he had a PhD in common sense.
Mm.
I
Oh, I
just
love
couldn't
that.
figure everything out. Yeah.
Very
So,
cool. Thank you for sharing. Let's talk about the future a little bit and think about, Brian, the next 1 to 3 years. What's going to be your number one priority or the biggest challenge that you see in achieving your goals?
well, about 2 years ago or 3 years ago, when Sean became a partner, we started on an exit plan for me, succession planning. So we've got 3 managers that we've been working with for the past 2 years. We're going through a process with them to get them fully engaged in all aspects of the company. And my role is continuing to take a step back, take a step back
Yeah.
to the point that I really think the next couple years, it's going to be more mentoring and coaching and just being that support person. So, and especially for Sean, obviously an owner can't do all the tasks. And what I'm trying to do is support Sean in different ways in different areas so he can focus more in a certain area and they can work together. The managers can work together. So I really see my role becoming just more stepping back and being that support person and not leading it anymore. I think the reins have been turned over at this point.
I love that you guys are being so intentional about that succession planning, right? And setting the business up to succeed you and continue to be successful. It goes back to that HR stuff you were talking about earlier. Right? That's a lot of work, right? It's a lot of focus and energy to make sure that the reins are being passed on and that the company's going to survive the succession. So great job in focusing on that.
Thank you. I truly believe that, I mean, the way I've always looked at it is that as we sit here today, there are 28 families relying on this company for income, not just one, not just me.
Yeah.
And, there's a responsibility that goes with that. And the succession plan is a key piece of that. We have at least out of those 28 employees, I would tell you that probably at least 10 have been with us over 10 years.
Wow.
We've got probably of the 28, another 8 that have been with us over 5 years. And we probably have somewhere around 5 or 6 that have been with us over 20 years. So,
Wow.
these people didn't just show up yesterday looking for a paycheck.
Yeah.
And that means a lot to me that they stayed through it, even through the recession and so forth. So, and then for me, the ego is everybody knows in a small business, the success rate on succession planning is probably the lowest rate of anything you talk about when you talk about small business.
Yes.
There's probably less small business failures than there are, when they're starting at inception than there are, So that's where I think that succession planning. So my ego is, if I really want to finish out this as a small business owner, if I really want to complete my career, the succession plan isn't. That's my final step.
Yeah.
And I see a lot of people, they don't, they walk off. They don't do that. And for me, I can't walk away from that. I think that's a big piece for what my career is going to be.
I love it. The legacy. That's an awesome
Yeah.
way to think about it. Yeah. Hey, Brian,
So,
last question. Jim Rohn, very huge business guru. One of his quotes was, "We become the average of the 5 people we spend the most time with." So as you think about that, what advice would you have for business owners who are trying to do it on their own?
that's a great question. So the first thing I would do is surround yourself with people that have diverse talent.
Mhm.
Most business owners hire like kind people,
Yeah.
and they normally hire people like themselves. So I really think you have to challenge yourself to look for talent that's diverse.
Mhm.
That's the number one thing.
Yeah.
The second thing is, I think, is to it gets back to what we talked about being doers and so much, but they need to learn to manage people and processes
Yeah.
and not manage tasks and jobs. If you're going to hire people that have a talent that's different than yours, a strength they bring to the table that's different than yours, you have to allow them to utilize that strength on the benefit of the company.
Yeah.
So, and I really think those are the first 2 things. The third thing is just outwork your mistakes. You're going to make them. They're going to happen. I always tell people in our company, if you've never failed, it's because you've never tried.
Right.
So the idea is when you make a mistake, you got to figure out how to outwork it. That's all it is. I had a guy one time tell me that the reason most companies go under the first 5 years they're in business is because they weren't able to overcome their mistakes.
Right. Yes. Yeah,
So
that makes sense. And you mentioned it earlier, right? There,
yeah,
especially in the first couple of years, there are a lot of mistakes, right?
right. And I think that's what we've done here. We've really pushed our culture to be diverse. with different personalities. We're real big in doing a disc on the profiles. It's part of our culture is to find people that have a unique talent that's different. Now that creates more of a challenge with meshing people together.
Sure. Yeah.
But I think it's well worth it. And I think especially a management team has to have some diversity on it.
Absolutely. Yes. Yeah. We use DISC as well. And we do team training and leadership training where we'll put the profiles up on the big screen and go, hey, look, you got a gap here. So either one of you have to play outside of your strengths and cover that gap, or you need to hire somebody into that gap.
Well, and the one thing that I would just say to you is, because I really enjoy what you're doing, is get an action coach. Everyone doesn't, no one thinks they can afford a coach. And I would tell you, you can't afford not to have a coach. And so hiring someone with your talent has to be it may not be in the first year or two, but I would say if you're still around in year 3, it's time. Get somebody engaged that can really help you walk through things. So,
Brian, it sounds like you've been blessed with some incredible people on your journey. If they were all here on the show today, what would you want to say to them?
Probably thank you. I mean, there's very few people I know. I have a lot of friends that all they do is talk about retirement. They talk about getting out. They talk about moving on. I've never felt that way. So when you're surrounded by people that really want and you enjoy being with and working together, it just makes every day fun. So I would just tell them thank you, because I really don't think that, you talk about what drives the company, and I'm the point person, but there's 28 people that are every day doing something I don't know about that's making the company better.
Yeah.
So
awesome. Brian, it's been a pleasure speaking with you today. Thanks so much for being on the show.
Thank you, Tim. It was great.
Thanks for listening to the Self-Made is a Myth show. Please help spread this movement by liking and subscribing to our show and following us on Facebook and LinkedIn. To join our movement, go to bemadtogether.com. Okay, folks, that's a wrap. Please pay it forward and be sure to tune in next time to the Self-Made is a Myth podcast.